In this video, we will combine the most tragic and terrible videos what deals with cave diving accidents. It will be combined videos, which we have discussed on this channel, but would like to highlight one more time to explain the dangers of this subject. Are you ready to watch these disturbing tragedies one more time? Then don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more exciting cave diving stories.
Exploring dangerous and unknown parts of the ocean requires a special kind of courage. It means being willing to take risks, push boundaries, and face challenges with bravery and determination. Only a handful of individuals has the necessary mettle to undertake such a challenging feat. One individual who embodied this spirit of adventure was Dion Dreyer. Today, we shall recount the story of this individual. The tale revolves around Dion Dreyer, an experienced diver who tragically lost his life during a dive in Boesmansgat. This cave was known to be the deepest dive in the world at the time. Deep caves offer a unique challenge to divers as they require extensive knowledge of the underwater environment and its unique challenges. Limited visibility, strong currents, and unpredictable water conditions are just a few of the factors that can make cave diving an extremely dangerous activity. Despite the risks, many experienced divers are drawn to the thrill and excitement of exploring the depths of these underwater caves. However, even the most experienced divers can encounter unforeseen complications during a dive, as was the case with Dreyer. It is essential for divers to take necessary precautions and adhere to safety guidelines to minimize the likelihood of accidents. One of the key considerations for divers is proper training. Divers must possess extensive knowledge of the underwater environment, including the unique challenges and risks associated with cave diving. Proper training can help divers develop the necessary skills, knowledge, and tools to minimize the risk of injury or death. Dion Dreyer, a true adventurer who grew up in Vereniging, a hamlet south of Johannesburg in South Africa, started his diving career at the age of 18 and soon advanced to a professional level. In 1994, just 2 years into his employment, Dion was invited to dive at 283-meter deep Bushman's Hall with several members of the South Africa Cave Diving Association, where he met his fateful demise. Dreyer was an experienced technical diver who had completed numerous cave dives prior to his dive in Boesmansgat. However, during his descent, he encountered an unexpected complication that led him to becoming stuck. Despite the efforts of his dive partner and support team, Dreyer was unable to be rescued and passed away at the scene. Upon Dreyer's passing, the diving world expressed its sorrow and condolences, acknowledging his talent and enthusiasm for the sport. The recovery of his body, however, created a special and difficult circumstance. The depths at which Dreyer's body was imprisoned in Boesmansgat's intricate underwater cave network posed substantial logistical and technological challenges. In honor of their son, Dreyer's parents built a plaque on a rock face above the Bushman's Hole entry pool. It was stated that the inscription was one of the reasons Dreyer's passing left such an impression on the cave diving world. In Philip Finch's book Diving into Darkness, a real tale of death and survival. Most other divers who pass away, even when cave diving, have their bodies found. Because of the cave's extreme depth, it was believed for many years that Dreyer's body would never be found there. Yet, the sign served as a constant reminder to cave divers that his remains were there. Despite the difficulties, a group of divers came together from all over the world to try to rescue Dreyer's body. They devoted many months to navigating the intricate underground network, making the required preparations, and carrying out the recovery mission. In the end, their efforts paid off, and Dreyer's body was found and given back to his family. The recovery of Dreyer's body was a testament to the dedication, skill, and teamwork of the divers involved in the operation. It also highlighted the inherent risks and dangers associated with extreme sports such as cave diving and the importance of adhering to strict safety protocols and procedures. In the aftermath of Dreyer's death and the subsequent recovery mission, there was a renewed focus on improving safety standards and training programs for divers, particularly in the area of technical diving. Organizations and trainers began to place greater emphasis on safety, risk management, and emergency response procedures, with the goal of preventing similar incidents in the future. In conclusion, Dion Dreyer's death emphasizes the dangers of extreme sports and the importance of safety guidelines. Diving organizations and trainers must equip divers with skills, knowledge, and tools to minimize the risk of injury or death. Safety must remain paramount to ensure the thrill of the activity without risking lives. Want to know the heartbreaking story of Rob Parker and his friend's cave diving expedition gone wrong? Watch this video to uncover the truth behind the tragic accident that left the diving community in shock. Four Shark Blue Hole, also known as Kali Cavern, is a large ocean blue hole located inside the barrier reef about 5 kilometers northwest of Dolly Cays, South Andros. This cavern is one of the biggest in the Bahamas, with a coral-rimmed basin entrance that is about 33 feet deep. Its dimensions are 230 feet long, 66 feet wide, and up to 197 feet deep, with a narrow crack at the far end of the cavern leading to an extension of the rift that reaches a depth of between 164 and 344 feet. The base of the entrance zone is made up of sand and fine white silt, and when there is a strong tidal current, water from the reef mixes with the interior water. On August 17, 1997, a team of 6 divers, including Rob Parker, went to Four Shark Blue Hole to shoot a documentary film in honor of Rob, who had died mysteriously during a dive in the Red Sea 4 months earlier. Rob was an experienced diver who had spent a lot of time exploring blue holes and had previously explored various caves and sumps in Pena Colorado. After 2 weeks of diving and filming, Rob decided to take one more dive to explore the unknown deep cavern beyond the restriction. Rob and Dan planned to explore a dangerous side passage that the filming crew would not allow them to dive due to safety concerns. To avoid being caught, they decided to do the dive before the crew joined them. The dive plan involved Rob and Dan diving with open-circuit side mount rigs, each carrying 1 tank of Trimax and air. 2 support divers remained in the main cavern while Rob and Dan descended to 220 feet on compressed air before continuing to 250 feet. To manage the narrow restriction at 164 feet, they left their mixed gas and oxygen cylinders at a depth of 30 feet for decompression. They began their dive around 8 p.m., starting with compressed air and making their way to a rift at the back of the cavern, 300 feet from the entrance and at a depth of about 120 feet. They brought along several cylinders of different gas mixes to use at varying depths and for decompression staging. 2 additional mixed gas cylinders, EANX-36, were prepared for decompression during the exit from the cave. The entrance to the rift is a wide vertical crack that narrows as one dives deeper, and no one knows the true depth of the cavern. A permanent guideline was used throughout their dive, passing through a 30-foot-long restriction and reaching about 175 feet. They switched to a Trimex cylinder at a depth of 220 feet, spent 8 minutes diving, and tied off the line before exiting. During the ascent, Dan noticed something was wrong with Rob at a depth of 180 feet and caught him as he sank to 230 feet. Dan towed Rob back to the line and they both made it to safety, with Rob regaining consciousness. Rob and Dan were exploring a cave when they came across a narrow restriction with only 2 options to pass through it. Rob chose to swim above the line while Dan went below it with limited air supply left. Dan managed to pass through the narrow passage and reach the decompression tank they had placed earlier. He waited for Rob but did not see him emerge. He signaled for help and later found out that Rob's body was stuck in a tight vertical restriction. Unfortunately, they were unable to recover his body due to the dangerous location. Dan had to undergo several hours of decompression while contemplating what might have happened to his friend. The next day, they discovered Rob's body, but the tide prevented them from retrieving it. On August 19, 2 days after Rob's disappearance, a team of divers including Brian Kakut, Dan Malone, Stephanie Schwabe, and Tom Illiff returned to the cave to recover Rob's body. While trying to move his body through an impassable passage, they had to remove his diving equipment because it made it hard to read his air tank's pressure gauge. However, when they went back to retrieve Rob's equipment, it was nowhere to be found. Although there was no autopsy performed on Rob's body, investigators believe that he suffered from nitrogen narcosis, a condition that caused disorientation, and may have led him to getting stuck in the rift. Despite being an experienced cave diver, Rob had no recent records of dives to the depths he reached on August 17th. After his body was retrieved, it was buried, and his family and friends mourned his loss. The Blue Hole, also called the Divers' Cemetery, is a renowned diving destination situated in Dahab, Egypt's northern region. Diving enthusiasts flock to this site to test their skills, as it reaches a depth of 394 feet and is home to a variety of reefs and coral fish. Despite its notoriety for being a dangerous site, with approximately 130 to 200 deaths in recent years, divers continue to seek adventure at the Blue Hole. Plaques on the cliff opposite the sinkhole commemorate those who have lost their lives there. The saddle, a shallow opening to the sea, and an 85-foot arch with a 181-foot roof are two of the most notable features of the Blue Hole. Divers can enter the hole via the El Bells Cave, follow the current along the shore wall, and exit through the saddle. Alternatively, they can access the hole directly from the beach and explore the arch. The story begins in April 2000 when Yuri Lipsky, a 22-year-old experienced scuba diver, went for a dive at the Blue Hole. He was aware of the unique challenge of diving in this area and was expected to have a safe dive due to his knowledge of what diving entails. However, Yuri had a desire to carry out a risky type of diving called a bounce dive, which is dangerous and requires proper training. Despite lacking the necessary technical skills and equipment, Yuri wanted to explore the arch in the Blue Hole and even asked for a video recording of it. Tariq Omar and Alex Hayes, who are technical divers, are well suited for a dive in such dangerous water territories. They understand that deep knowledge is necessary before entering deep water. Yuri met with Tariq and expressed his desire for a video recording, but Tariq advised him to undergo 2 weeks of training before attempting to dive into the arch region. Yuri had a weekend to explore the Blue Hole, despite lacking experience and certification. He searched for instructors to accompany him, but they refused due to his lack of experience. As a result, he went diving alone, equipped with a single air cylinder helmet with a camera attached and a belt filled with weights. As he descended into the cave, Yuri realized his rate of descent was too fast, and his buoyancy control device didn't slow him down. It was possibly due to his additional weight caused by the camera, leading him to sink deeper than intended. His tank's nitrogen volume began to decrease, and he reached a depth of 262 feet, which caused him to experience nitrogen narcosis. He panicked and overfilled his buoyancy control device, causing a blowout and affecting his buoyancy and positioning. Additionally, diving beyond 213 feet causes oxygen toxicity, which can lead to breathing difficulties, dizziness, and seizures. Technical divers bring multiple gas tanks to combat the effect of narcosis. Yuri's fatal dive in the Blue Hole was due to his use of a single nitrogen-oxygen mix cylinder instead of the safer trimix. The video from his helmet camera captured the terrifying moments when Yuri struggled to breathe and eventually drowned after going too deep. He removed his gear in panic, and his attempts to resurface were unsuccessful due to the weight of the water. Despite Yuri's mother's plea for help from Tarek, a renowned deepwater diver, Yuri's body was recovered 2 days later at a depth of 302 feet. Tarek has recovered over 100 bodies from the Blue Hole, where many experienced divers have underestimated the dangers. The camera recorded the evidence of Yuri's fatal dive, showing his anguish but not his face. The man began his dive as a routine expedition, but soon found himself in a perilous situation that ultimately led to his demise. He became disoriented and struggled to breathe while kicking up sand and creating a cloud of confusion around him. He made the fatal mistake of removing his breathing equipment, and it became clear that his overconfidence was his downfall. Yuri neglected to check his equipment and dove without proper training, a partner, and with additional weight from his camera. This tragic incident is not unique to Blue Hole, as there have been numerous deaths in this location, most of which are not officially recorded. In honor of these victims, plaques have been placed on the cliff opposite the Blue Hole. However, the diving community has taken measures to enforce safety guidelines and ban uncertified divers from entering the site. Despite the risks, experienced technical divers with standard equipment can safely explore the Blue Hole's depths. One of the most difficult challenges for divers here is managing their oxygen. If there's a delay, the time required to dive through the horizontal section will necessitate the use of more than one oxygen cylinder in order to safely return to the surface. Laws exist to ensure our safety regardless of their magnitude. David Gant's illegal adventure at Nickajack Cave serves as an example of the repercussions that breaking these laws can bring. Nickajack Cave is a well-known site that has been around for centuries. It was mined for saltpeter in the early 1800s, and during the Civil War, it was one of the largest saltpeter caves, as saltpeter was an essential component of gunpowder. Today, that cave serves as a wildlife refuge managed by the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. The cave is known as the Bat Cave because pregnant female gray bats flock there every spring to give birth and raise their young. Its name is derived from the town Chickamauga, Cherokee of Nickajack, located between the Tennessee River. Therefore, breaking the laws protecting such a significant natural habitat can result in severe consequences, as in the case of David Gant's actions. Cave diving has two vital rules: obtaining proper authorization and preparation before entering an underwater cave, and equipping oneself with essential gear, such as a constant guideline to the entrance. However, on August 15, 1992, David Gant and his friends disregarded these rules and illegally entered Nickajack Cave without authorization or appropriate equipment. Their objective was to hunt for large catfish. This reckless decision marked the start of a harrowing and unforgettable experience for David. David and his friends embarked on a prohibited diving adventure on the night of Saturday, August 15, 1992, outside the fence where they knew bats dwelled. They were careful not to disturb the creatures and were in pursuit of a giant catfish that David had spotted the night before. As they descended into the greenish, muddy water, their lights illuminated the murky rock bottom, but there was no fish in sight. When David checked his air gauge, he signaled to his friends that it was time to return to the surface. However, as they attempted to ascend, they unexpectedly dropped even deeper into the cave. As they tried to surface again, the divers found themselves disoriented and lost. Panic set in as their fins stirred up silt, creating an underwater fog. David and his friends swam in opposite directions. David unfortunately ventured deeper into the cave with only one air pocket to rely on, while his friend was fortunate enough to find an airfield passage near the entrance before exploring further. It was a harrowing experience that reminded them of the dangers of cave diving and the importance of caution in uncharted territory. David's luck had run out as he felt the air pocket around him depleting and his breaths becoming more rapid. The ESC had to open generators and bypass spillways and dams to lower the water level at Water Lane, which was a costly decision to rescue David. His companion bravely dove into the flooded cave, calling out his name as they searched for him. Fortunately, they heard David's response and found him just in time before he lost consciousness. The rescue team captain noted in his report that the victim was found alive and well, and everyone was happy. It was a truly miraculous and terrifying experience for David, who had been struggling in the dark waters for 17 hours. Thanks to the two brave individuals who found and rescued him, he was able to be guided out of the cave and back to safety. To sum it all up, this was a harrowing experience for David, but he was incredibly lucky to have been rescued. It is a testament to the bravery and skill of the rescue team and David's companion, who risked their lives to save him. Their actions are a reminder of the importance of quick thinking, bravery, and teamwork in emergency situations. A family of 3 went on a dive adventure in Twin Caves, but as they went deeper, they stirred up silt and things went awry. Watch till the end for more on this diving tragedy. Raymond, an open-water diving instructor, took his college-age children, Alexandra and his son, for a diving adventure into Twin Caves in August 2012. Despite cave adventurer's owner Ed Sorensen's warning that only certified cave divers should enter due to the danger of silting, the family hired a pontoon boat and proceeded with the dive. While other open-water divers were exiting the cave, the family decided to go deeper into the cave, disregarding the advice from the shop owner. As they entered, Andrea, a certified cave diver, her husband, and their diving buddy were leaving the cave, diving higher up to minimize silt disruption. Andrea observed 3 members of a family diving team enter the cave, but she assumed they didn't see her and her group. Divers entering and leaving the cave could stir up silt, which reduces visibility, making it a hazardous environment. Alexandra and her family passed Andrea and her group 20 feet, 6 meters, into the cave, causing silt to obscure the view. Alexandra, her father, and brother used up and down flutter kicks, which stirred up more silt, further reducing visibility. The situation turned life-threatening when the visibility dropped to 0. Alexandra panicked and kicked harder, worsening the situation. When the silt filled up the cave, Raymond lost his daughter. He dove further into the cave to find her, and after grabbing her, he signaled that they needed to leave immediately. The lack of visibility made it difficult for them to find the exit. Raymond adjusted his air tank and line to prevent damage to his equipment. He briefly let go of Alexandra but continued to search for her, and eventually he reached the entrance of the cave safely, but Alexandra was not with him. As Raymond prepared to leave the cave, Andrea and her group were making their exit as well. They had been swimming high up in the cave due to heavy silt accumulation on the cave floor. Just before reaching the cave's exit, Andrea felt something touch her arms, and she saw a light beam on her face. It was Raymond's son's fins. Andrea signaled for him to leave the cave, and within a few minutes he reached the surface. Andrea and her husband followed suit, relying on touch contact since they could no longer see themselves. Meanwhile, their other partner exited the cave through a different opening. Once they reached the surface, they only saw Raymond's son and asked about his father and sister. The son was in shock, informing them that his father and sister were still in the cave and they needed help urgently. Raymond surfaced a few moments later, asking if anyone had seen Alexandra, but no one had. Realizing that his daughter was lost in the silted cave, they returned to search for her. However, their attempts only caused more silt accumulation, putting their lives at risk. They eventually decided to call for help, and luckily, an experienced cave diver and rescuer, Ed Sorensen, was nearby preparing for a cave diving class. He quickly arrived at the incident site and was briefed on the location of the lost girl by her father. Despite the difficult conditions, with almost zero visibility and thick mud covering the cave, Ed deployed his reel and made his way to the gold line inside the cave. Although the situation was challenging, Ed had been known for diving in places where other divers wouldn't dare to go and has always been successful in his rescue operations. He continued to search for Alexandra, who was likely in a great panic, and kept her safety as his top priority. Rescuing a victim in a panicked state can be a risky endeavor. However, Ed Sorensen, a skilled diver, successfully rescued a girl who was trapped in a cold and dark cave. He took precautions, tying off his primary spool and deploying a safety spool to search for her. When he found her, she was standing in silt and breathing from a pocket of air at the top of the cave. Ed told her to hold on to his arms, and they made their way to the entrance of the cave. They dove upstream to the surface, and the rescue was completed within 10 minutes, much to the surprise and joy of those waiting for them. The girl was cold and shivering, having survived the ordeal without any thermal protection. She was left with less than a third of air in her cylinder and had almost given up before Ed found her. She and her father were deeply grateful to Ed, and she sent him letters of gratitude for several months. Despite her father's offer of money, Ed refused it. Raymond later donated a large sum of money to the Divers Alert Network, DAN. To avoid such heart-wrenching experiences, divers are advised to stay within their level of training and follow guidelines for safety. In June 2010, a skilled French cave diver named Eric Establi embarked on a challenging and dangerous adventure to explore the Dragon Cave in southern France. Despite knowing the risks involved, Establi was determined to discover the secrets hidden within the dark and treacherous cave system, which was known for its narrow passageways and strong currents. However, his passion for exploration quickly turned into a fight for survival as he found himself trapped and alone, struggling to breathe in the deep and twisted underwater tunnels. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on our latest videos exploring the fascinating world of cave diving. Eric entered the Dragon Cave with the intention of exploring previously unmapped areas of the cave. He brought everything he needed, including 2 rebreathers, 2 scooters, 5 air tanks, and 1,476 feet of dive line. He intended to dive for 6 hours at a depth of about 285 feet. He was excited, nervous, and focused as he moved deeper into the cave. The dive was going well until he hit one of the muddy walls, causing silts to kick up all around him. Eric knew he needed to wait for the silt to settle before proceeding, so he did. However, even with his very bright headlamp, he couldn't see much further down the cave. He had to concentrate all of his efforts on staying in the correct passages and avoiding getting his equipment snagged. He was deep inside the cave with little visibility and alone in the pitch black. Finally, he descended a narrow passage and emerged on the other side, only to be confronted by a rockfall in the cave. He needed to move quickly, but the silt kicked up again, blinding him and knocking him out. Eric knew he had to get out of there or risk becoming trapped, running out of air, or dying. He looked for another way out, but every option he found was blocked. He was out of air and had no way out of the cave. To be more agile in the tight passages, he decided to remove some of the gear. He needed to find an airspace where he wouldn't suffocate from oxygen deprivation once his air tanks were depleted. He also knew that if rescuers entered the cave, they would see that he deliberately left his gear and that he might still be alive after the rockfall. Eric was now trapped on the wrong side of the several-meter-thick rockfall. This was his worst nightmare because he failed to appear outside the cave on time. The days leading up to his disappearance were filled with obstacles he had to overcome, but he was eventually successful. Eric's passion for cave diving drew him to the depths of the Dragon Cave, but it also contributed to his disappearance. A massive operation was launched to find Eric, involving various agencies such as the French Spiller Relief, High Mountain Police Units, firefighters, and the Red Cross. The search started as soon as Eric was reported missing, but it soon became a complex task. Rescuers worked tirelessly around the clock to locate Eric and searched extensively, including the river that ran through the cave. After a week of intense searching, Eric's body was discovered on October 23, 2010, by volunteer cavers who had explored a 150-meter-long natural chimney. Rick Stanton and John Valenthin joined forces with expert divers Pedro Belordi and Luisa Casati for their second attempt to rescue Eric. Their new strategy involved using slimmer diving equipment to fit through a narrow gap in the rockfall. At the location of Eric's emergency scooter, they searched for a way over the obstruction and discovered that Eric had left a gap they could use to enter the cave. They decided to resupply before attempting a third rescue mission. With a sense of urgency, they navigated the rockfall, using a gap near the top of the ceiling to get through, despite the danger of blacking out due to the heat. However, Eric was not on the other side. On their third mission, they ventured 600 feet deeper into the uncharted part of the cave, risking their lives to find their friend. Despite the challenges, Rick and John remained determined to rescue Eric, holding on to hope that he was waiting in an air pocket. Their mental resilience and experience drove them to press on in their search for their friend, motivated by their unwavering desire to bring him back to safety. During their swim through a clear passage, they unexpectedly found Eric 15 feet below them in a cave, which was a shocking discovery. Apparently, Eric had been struggling to find an air pocket but ran out of air before he could. After 10 days of searching, they finally located Eric in the cave's depths, and the task of retrieving his body began. However, the process was difficult due to the narrow gap and rockfall in the cave, and despite their best efforts, Rick and John were unable to retrieve Eric's body without putting themselves at risk. Ultimately, they had to leave Eric's body behind, but were able to recover his diving computer, which was crucial for the investigation. In today's video, we discuss a tragic incident involving a diver who went to retrieve the body of another diver who had been dead in a sinkhole for 10 years. Unfortunately, the promise he made to the victim's parents about recovering their son's body landed him in serious trouble. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Dave Shaw went down the Bushman's Hole in October 2004. Dave Shaw was an Australian scuba diver, technical diver, and airline pilot for Cathay Pacific beginning in 1989. He had previously flown for the Missionary Aviation Fellowship in Papua New Guinea and Tanzania before joining Cathay Pacific. He had also flown agricultural planes in New South Wales and South Australia. He was a passionate and charming man. He was devoted to his profession until his death. Dave set out to achieve a new record and push his limits during his dive in Bushman's Hole. He descended to a depth of around 900 feet and explored the bottom of the sinkhole for a few minutes. Despite experiencing some symptoms of narcosis at a depth of 800 feet, he continued on. As he approached a depth of 876 feet, he discovered something unexpected. It was the body of Dion Dreyer, who had disappeared during a dive in the same location 10 years prior. Although his mask was still in place, some of his body parts were no longer covered in flesh. Despite his efforts, Dave was unable to thoroughly examine his body as it was concealed in the mud and he couldn't retrieve it during his initial dive. After resurfacing from his 10-hour expedition, Dave informed Dion's parents, Theo and Marie, that he had discovered their son's body. Although initially incredulous, Dave assured them that he would go back to the Bushman's Hole to retrieve Dion's body. Dave and Don Shirley were two divers who undertook the deepest underwater recovery in history. They devised a complex dive plan, but due to the nature of the operation, they needed up to 9 divers to assist them. There was concern that the body they were trying to recover, belonging to Dion, may have deteriorated significantly, so they decided to bring a bag to carry it in. The recovery team had all the necessary equipment prepared, and while Dave and Don were familiar with most of it, Dave was unfamiliar with the new helmet camera he wanted to use. Despite this, they were ready to proceed with the operation. 2 days before the final dive, the recovery team assembled at Bushman's Hole and were assigned their respective roles. Dave was tasked with retrieving Dion's body from the depths of the sinkhole. Although he openly instructed the team to prioritize their safety and avoid risking their lives for the sake of recovering the body, he and Don secretly agreed to signal each other with their flashlights if necessary. Dave descended to a depth of 886 feet and located Dion's body, intending to place it in a bag and take it to a depth of 725 feet where Don would be waiting to help bring it to the surface after a decompression period of 10 hours. However, the recovery team outside could not see anyone emerging from the sinkhole, causing Van Schaik to suspect that something had gone wrong during the dive. Despite their concerns, they were unsure of the exact situation and continued to wait for news. Don, who was waiting for Dave at a depth of 725 feet, became concerned when Dave did not appear. He noticed that no bubbles were coming from the area where Dave had dived. Bubbles were supposed to be coming from Dave's ascent by this point, but there were none. Then he noticed a light in the distance, but it wasn't moving. Because of how far Dave had gone, they suspected he had been exposed to dangerous narcotics. Narcosis impairs one's ability to think, so when in this state, you must be completely focused in order to get your mind to think and solve whatever problems you are facing. Don decided to descend to the depth where Dave had dived after some time to see what was going on and how he could help. When he reached about 800 feet, he heard a very loud sound. Don's regulator controller had burst. He had to prioritize saving his own life over finding his friend. Don had to manually control his air supply as he attempted to return to the support divers above him, so they made it back to the surface. Don then informed them that Dave would be unable to return to the surface. Don nearly died there as well. He was left with approximately 8 hours of decompression and eventually permanent damage that impaired his balance. They were devastated by Dave's death, but they consoled themselves. Later, the police divers returned to Bushman's Hole to retrieve all of the equipment and dive lines left over from the failed recovery operation. While they were doing this, they noticed Dion and Dave's bodies floating up from the sinkhole's base. They were wedged in a crevice very close to the surface. The entire dive team was taken aback by this. They assumed they had dived past it without noticing it earlier. Van Schaik stated that Dave had kept his promise to bring Dion's body back to the surface after they discovered that Dion's body was beneath Dave Shaw's body. In today's video, we'll look at the 1973 Mount Gambier accident, which is well known among cave divers all over the world. On May 26, 1973, John Beckerman, Peter Burr, Larry Reynolds, Gordon Roberts, Robert Smith, and the 3 Millard siblings, Christine Millett, Glenn Millett, and Stephen Millett, all arrived in Mount Gambier, South Australia, with one goal in mind: to dive the shaft. Nobody could have predicted the horrors that were about to unfold. With that out of the way, let's get into today's tragic story about 8 divers who dared to test the shaft's dark, bottomless tunnels. If you want to learn more about the world of cave diving and stay up to date with our latest videos, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The deadly shaft was discovered completely by chance in 1938, when a perplexed farmer inquired as to why his horse had suddenly tripped up in an empty field. He discovered a small patch of ground about a foot across that had given way to a sinkhole that went much deeper than anyone could test without the proper equipment. As word of the shaft spread, curious divers traveled long distances to see what all the fuss was about. In the mid-1960s, a local diver descended 69 feet into the massive clear water cave through the now 3-foot wide opening. The main chamber is 460 feet deep and 263 feet wide at its narrowest point. Because the entry point is approximately 20 feet below ground level, divers and their equipment had to be carefully lowered into the water from above. A rock pile lies directly beneath the opening, with 2 dark tunnels descending from both sides. One faces northwest and descends 260 feet, while the other faces east and descends 407 feet. The group decided to do a practice dive in the shaft a day after arriving on the 27th, tracing the guideline around 150 feet to the rock pile below. They quickly scanned the pile before returning to the surface to prepare for the main dive the following day. On May 28, 1973, the divers arrived, excited to explore the cave. Soon after, they lowered themselves on the guideline they had prepared the day before. In a personal statement, Robert Smith stated that they planned to go no further than the edge of the rock pile, specifically avoiding both tunnels adjacent to the rock bar. To go beyond the rock pile, experienced divers know that a special blend of gases in your tank is required to avoid nitrogen narcosis. Nitrogen narcosis is a drowsy state caused by breathing higher pressure nitrogen. This produces an effect similar to alcohol intoxication in the diver. The deeper you go, the more severe the effects, which significantly impair your cognitive and bodily functions, leading to drowning and death in several cases. At 180 feet, Robert began to feel the effects of nitrogen narcosis. With his knowledge of its effect, Robert signaled to the group that he was going to swim back to the top of the rock pile while the rest of the group continued exploring. Robert waited patiently, swimming around the top of the rock pile. Glenn Millett would then return and inform Robert that he is out of air. Robert and Glenn dashed back to the surface, where Larry Reynolds was already waiting for them. Peter Burrows emerged minutes later, his oxygen tank completely empty. Glenn strapped on a spare tank and went in search of the other 4 divers who remained in the cave. When he arrived about 230 feet below the surface, he found his brother Stephen Millett's lights and camera, but he couldn't see more than 12 inches in front of his mask. From the group's initial descent, the entire area around him had silted up. Glenn would do his best to find them, but it was nearly impossible under the current circumstances. He was defeated and realized he needed to return to the surface to save his own life. Robert Smith joined him but was unable to continue past the 225-foot drop due to the onset of nitrogen narcosis symptoms. At this point in the rescue, the survivors realized that their friends and family were no longer alive. They knew it would be a body recovery from this point on. The police sent a dive team down around 200 feet the next day, but they couldn't find anyone. It took almost a year of grueling effort to recover the bodies of Stephen Millett, Christine Millett, Gordon Roberts, and John Beckerman from the shaft where they lost their lives. Almost 8 months passed before the first body was discovered, and the other 3 remained hidden in the depths of the shaft until they were eventually recovered through 8 separate dives and the use of light equipment. The victims were found at depths ranging from 50 feet to 190 feet below the surface, and it is believed that they encountered nitrogen narcosis while exploring a tunnel darkened by silt, causing them to unknowingly descend deeper into danger. This tragic event was the only known fatality in the shaft, and it prompted the creation of safety measures to protect cave divers. It serves as yet another cautionary tale of the risks that can accompany diving adventure. Join us in today's video as we delve in to discover the mystery behind Ben McDaniel's disappearance and the massive search effort undertaken by 16 divers. Don't miss the end as we unravel the mystery. Subscribe to our channel for more content. Located in Ponce de Leon, Florida, Vortex Spring is a popular destination for both experienced and inexperienced divers. The spring boasts a cold, freshwater flow of over 28 million US gallons per day and has a constant water temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Vortex Spring also features a cave system that stretches 1,642 feet long and connects to the Florida Aquifer. Ben McDaniel spent a week in Tennessee 4 months after relocating to Florida to train as a certified instructor and obtain a cave diving certification. He shared with his girlfriend Emily Greer his plan to start a diving business. Ben left his parents in Tennessee with an appreciation letter and a promise to care for them in their old age. He returned to Florida on August 14th and 15th, where he went for a dive at Santa Rosa Beach House and Vortex Spring. Ben was seen by other divers inspecting the entrance during the day, and he tested his equipment and logged his dive in the afternoon. In the evening, he began preparations for another dive. Ben went diving at around 7:30 p.m., wearing a helmet and with his light on. As he entered the water, Eduardo Taron and Cronin were returning from their own dive. Taron noticed that Ben was struggling to open a gate, so he dove back down to unlock it for him. Once Taron saw that Ben had entered the cave, he returned to the surface. Normally, Cronin would wait to see the bubbles indicating Ben's decompression process, but this time they went back to Taron's house to relax without monitoring Ben. The next day, Ben's truck was still parked in the lot, but he was nowhere to be found since the previous night's dive. Taron reported Ben missing to the Holmes County Sheriff's Office, and deputies discovered his diving logs and map, but none of his diving equipment was found. Ben's wallet, cell phone, and unfed dog were found, and the area was sealed off as a crime scene. Ben was assumed to have drowned in a cave while struggling to exit by the police and dive shop personnel. News of the incident spread quickly, leading to the arrival of volunteer cave divers who embarked on a recovery operation during the weekend. Ben's family and girlfriend Emily Greer also came to watch the operation from the surface. Captain Harry Hamilton, an investigator in Holmes County, emphasized the need for skilled divers due to the dangerous nature of the operation. Despite the presence of experienced divers, no sign of Ben's body was found after an extensive search of the cave's passages. However, some of Ben's equipment was discovered near the entrance of the cave. As a cave diver, it is crucial to have decompression cylinders placed at different points along the exit rather than just at the entrance. Unfortunately, when analyzed, the extra cylinders that were supposed to contain the appropriate gas mixture for the depth to which Ben had dived were found to contain only normal gas. After 4 days, Ed Sorensen, a highly experienced and skilled diver, was called upon to recover Ben's body from the Vortex Spring cave system. Despite warnings from other divers about the dangers of diving beyond their limits, Ed accepted the challenge and entered the cave with smaller cylinders and a propulsion vehicle to quickly search for Ben. However, he did not find any evidence that Ben had been in the cave, and concluded that his lack of training in cave diving would have made it highly unlikely for him to navigate the narrow passages of the cave system. Even Steve Keene, an experienced diver who had previously mapped the Vortex Springs cave system, made 7 dives into the cave without finding any trace of Ben. The McDaniels' desperation led them to offer thousands of dollars to anyone who could help find their son's body, but no one was successful, even with the help of a remotely operated underwater vehicle. 16 divers risked their lives to search for Ben over 36 consecutive days, but they found nothing. As a result, suggestions arose to search for Ben's body on land or consider the possibility that the water had washed it out through the spring's outlet. Despite their best efforts, Ben's parents were left without answers, and the search was eventually called off. Some divers, like Cronin and Kelly, speculated that Ben might have arranged his disappearance to leave behind his past. The authorities searched the area with cadaver dogs and helicopters but found no evidence. They also conducted multiple tests on the spring's water for months but found no sign of a decomposed human body. Taran, who left Ben in the cave, passed a lie detector test without any suspicion. Despite all efforts, the case remains unsolved. Few caves on Earth are more fascinating than Devil's Den in Williston, Florida. Many photographers and videographers have described it as the most beautiful cave in the world, but it's not just the natural scenery that makes this cave mysterious and intriguing. It's also the fact that multiple people have died there, sometimes under mysterious circumstances. Let's explore this tragic story. In 1990, Devil's Den, a newly purchased and renovated diving site, experienced its first reported fatality. Details of the incident are scarce, with only a few records, including an unpublished newspaper article, shedding light on the horrifying event. The incident occurred on Sunday, October 7, 1990, and involved 3 scuba divers identified only by their initials: CP, KK, and CM. While little is known about their identities beyond being diving enthusiasts, clues suggest that CP was the most experienced and the leader of the group. CP had previously visited the site just 2 weeks prior and was rescue certified. albeit only for open water and not for caves or caverns. In a curious detail, CP was the only diver who chose to bring an additional set of air tanks, which raises questions about the circumstances leading to the tragic outcome at Devil's Den. When the group arrived at the cave around noon, they eagerly embarked on a dive together. From what we know, the dive seemed to have gone smoothly, and it likely lasted a considerable amount of time based on the timeline. Scuba tanks can last well over an hour depending on the depth of the dive. Given that Devil's Den is known for its breathtaking underwater rock formations, it's understandable that the group may have taken their time exploring the vast cave. With depths reaching 50 feet and widths expanding to 200 feet, the underwater space offers a plethora of different rock formations to behold. There are wide underground caverns to marvel at, as well as narrow swim-throughs that require divers to squeeze through one at a time. It's easy to imagine how groups could easily become separated in this maze of natural wonders. In addition to the stunning rock formations, Devil's Den is also home to an array of fish and turtles who have found refuge in its once trashed waters. The three divers would have witnessed an awe-inspiring scene during their thorough exploration underwater. After resurfacing and removing their masks, they likely regrouped, excitedly discussing their experiences. It was sometime between 1 and 2 p.m., and they may have taken a short break to enjoy lunch together in the scenic natural surroundings. Despite not knowing their identities, one can easily imagine the familiar sight of three friends indulging in their passion, preparing to venture back into the cave. The tranquility of the moment is poignant, considering the tragic events that were about to unfold. At 2:15 p.m., CP, an experienced diver who had brought extra air tanks, made the decision to return to the cave for another dive, leaving behind their friends KK and CM, who had no air tanks left. CP waved goodbye and descended into the water with their mask on, never to be seen alive again. It is likely that KK and CM grew worried after a while, since their previous dive was long and scuba dives usually take at least half an hour. They eventually called 911, but unfortunately they were unable to search for their friend themselves due to the lack of air tanks. When rescue crews arrived, things looked grim as CP was still missing. Searching the underwater world of Fountain Devil's Den is a challenging and time-consuming process, and it may have taken hours, especially considering where CP was eventually found, at the very bottom of the pool, having made contact with the silt on the cave's floor. The prevalent theory suggests that CP's vision was obscured, leading CP to become disoriented and trapped in a narrow passage known as the bed plane. This passage, described as only 2 feet high, was even narrower with scuba gear on. Disturbingly, clawing marks were found in the bed plane where CP was discovered. Unfortunately, there's limited information available about the individuals involved, which makes it challenging to understand the full story in the aftermath of this tragic event. However, this incident marked a significant shift in the perception of the infamous scuba site, which was relatively new to the public at the time. Presently, a warning sign inside Devil's Den is prominently displayed with a striking image of the Grim Reaper wielding a skiff. The sign chillingly reveals that over 300 divers have lost their lives in similar caves, cautioning that it could happen to anyone. It emphatically states that there is nothing in the cave worth risking one's life for, sending shivers down one's spine. As incredible as Devil's Den may be, it is not worth taking any risks or exceeding one's qualifications. It's horrifying to think that someone's life could suddenly come to an end in such a wondrous and memorable place among friends, as was the case with KK, CM, and CP. While we may never know exactly what happened with CP, their story serves as a reminder of the dangers of exploring unfamiliar environments like Devil's Den. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the bell icon to be notified when we post another bizarre incident.